So my name's Rachel Norman from the University of Stirling. I am part of the leadership team for SCAF. So welcome to this 14th in our webinar series. For those of you who don't know, I've got a few slides to introduce SCAF before we move on to the speakers. So SCAF is a Scottish Funding Council funded cross Scotland, cross-disciplinary, cross-sector collaboration. We're looking to do evidence-based work underpinned by available evidence to look at food system transformation, wanting our outputs to be inclusive and shaped by a diverse group of stakeholders and other voices. Any individual from any part of the food system is welcome to join SCAF, and collaboration, working together, is the core of what we do. And we were discussing this earlier. Basically, SCAF's great. Join. We're lovely. We have a lovely time. Lots of lovely activities, which I will describe a bit more in a minute, if I can move the slide. So we're here for this seminar, which will come up in a minute. So if you want to introduce yourselves in the chat, and say we'll ask you to mute microphones when the webinar starts. We're recording this session, so be aware of that. And we've got two talks today, but as I say, I'll introduce those properly in a minute. So as I just said, SCAF's an Alliance for Research Challenge, and we're looking across the food system at the whole food future that's in keeping people and the planet healthy without jeopardizing culture and traditions. So obviously a broad-based, complex problem, and lots of interesting approaches to that. So we have 4 themes. So I lead the mapping theme, or I'm one of the leaders of the mapping theme. We've got an innovation theme. Ada is one of the leaders on the security theme, I think, and a culture theme. And then we've got 2 cross-cutting pieces of work around food systems and our Academy of Citizens. We do lots of different activities, including these webinars. We've recently had a writing retreat, so I'd keep your eye out for those coming up next year. They're a fantastic opportunity, connecting with different stakeholders. So there's lots of fun things to keep an eye out for. So again, there's what's that thing called, a QR code, if you want to join us or find out more about particular events. And there's financial support for pump priming projects, and in particular right now a funding call's open for pump priming projects between the quantum arc, the Applied Research Challenge, and the food arc. So that deadline is coming up to support collaborations between quantum technologies and food sectors. That's very open. Lots of possible ideas would be welcome for that call. And again, there's a QR code if you want to find out more about that. Okay, so our today's session. I've been trying to decide which way to do this. So first, we've got a two-handed presentation by Seiko Yazaki and Ada Garcia. So Seiko specialises in religious studies, and her current interests address cross-cultural interactions and a comparative study of Sufism and Zen. She's also a food consciousness instructor, pursuing a study of sustainability issues using Japanese ethical traditions of Mottanai, and we will find out how that's pronounced properly in a minute, I'm sure, as a sustainable environmental practice, especially in the fields of food and clothing. And Ada is a public health nutritionist. Her research aim is to promote optimal nutrition to reduce diet and health inequalities. Her research focuses on childhood nutrition and the design, implementation and evaluation of nutrition interventions at household or community level. Right, so I remember I'm also going to introduce Evie, who is our second speaker, because much as I'd like to think I'll remember to do it in between talks, I don't trust myself. So Evie is a registered public health nutritionist, has a diverse background in food policy, research and nutrition education with a focus on advancing evidence-based public health strategies. She's currently a lecturer at the School of Pharmacy, Applied Sciences and Public Health at Robert Gordon's University, and is a course leader for the MSc in Public Health Nutrition. You've previously held a scientific and policy role at Food Standards Scotland, contributing to national guidance on folic acid fortification and front of pack labelling. And at the Rowett Institute, she conducted research on gluten sensitivity and contributed to the development of Nutrition and Wellbeing Future Learn course that has had over 100,000 registrations worldwide. And her recent, well, all of our speakers are going to be talking about recent SCAF pump priming projects, but Evie's in particular has enabled her to lead an interdisciplinary study, which we'll find out about shortly. Okay, so hang on, what am I doing? We're going to find out what do we value in food, and we'll start off. I will unshare and hand over to Ada and Seiko. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this kind introduction. And so my name is Seiko, and together with Ada and also research assistant Hattie and Oliver Braid from Macintosh at the Willow, we did this project called Traditional Japanese Cuisine for Planetary Health and workshop development for children and parents. And this was funded by the was it the first round of SCAF pump priming. And so at the beginning, so I'm going to talk a little bit about background and then hand over to Ada, who's going to talk about aims and actual methodology and what we found. And I will come back and just briefly mention what our next steps are. So as we all know, food waste has been a really significant issue. And in 2021, Scottish households waste an estimated 59% of avoidable food and drink, and food waste contributes to 6% of Scotland's total carbon footprint. And among the nutrient-dense foods, fresh food is most wasted in Scotland. And according to the survey in 2019, 14% of Scottish children and 22% of adults meet the 5-a-day fruit-based recommendation. So there are a lot of things we have to tackle here. But food choices are determined by many factors, and of course just personal preferences, but also social and economic backgrounds, and food culture and traditions, and literacy and food environments, and actual experience as well. So that's why we are trying to tackle these issues through a multidisciplinary approach, because there are multiple factors that we have to take an action on. So as Rachel kindly mentioned, I'm lecturer here, but I'm also a food consciousness instructor. And food consciousness means we are trying to raise awareness of the connection among farmers, producers, or distributors, and cooks, consumers. So what we often, so as you can see in the logo of food consciousness, the OOD are connected. That shows, we are conscious about this connection. So what happens, especially in, not only among children, but in some adults as well, we often lose the connection between what we eat and also how those ingredients are produced in the farm and thanks to the nature. And we often forget about we are actually taking life of plants or animals or whatever we are going to have. And also there's a direct connection between what we eat and what we are as well. And direct connection between individual health and also planetary health. So there's a lot of connection we should be aware of, and that's the idea of food consciousness approach. And food consciousness is based on, this is a project led by a Japanese professor in an institution in Tokyo, and it's based on the 5 core values. And we are going to focus on only 2 here. So just briefly, so in Japan, before eating, we say itadakimasu. That means I humbly receive or eat. It's not like I enjoy food. It's actually more like humility is there. And then after eating, thank you for putting so much effort for this delicious meals. And then okage-sama, and that literally means thanks to shadow or thanks to invisible things. So all the connection I just mentioned, that nature or natural forces or farmers or distributors, they are not visible when we are about to eat the meal. So when we are looking at only an apple, something in front of us, we cannot really see those connections. But we should be also conscious about those invisible connections. So that's okage-sama. And then mottainai, yes, it is pronounced as mottainai, which is often translated as what a waste in English, but it has much more, much deeper meaning there. And it's about having respect for the resources around us. And if you could go to the next slide. So mottainai is a Japanese ethical and religious principle, and it means various things, but one is being disrespectful or offensive to Shinto deities or Buddhas or someone higher, or undeserved or thankful and regretful that something or someone is being discarded needlessly. So Wangari Maathai, who won the Nobel Prize some years ago, she really liked this idea of mottainai and incorporated this principle into her environmental activities, because she thought mottainai encapsulates not only reduce, reuse, and recycle, but the fourth R, respect. So we often say, we shouldn't waste, we should avoid waste. But why do we waste? Maybe because if we are respectful of the ingredient we are going to eat, if we are respectful of the environment surrounding us, we cannot waste anything because there's respect. So that's the idea of mottainai. And for food consciousness activities, we use the ABC model, so activity before concept. And so it is very interactive and experience-based approach we are taking. So trying to use the five senses, and then touching or feeling, and then trying to kind of have more connection between us and also what we are going to eat. And then we talk about concept and theory later on, but an activity always comes first. And the ultimate aim is that once we understand this, we can see the planet in the bowl we are going to eat. So, Ada.
Okay, so following these learnings from Mottanai and what happens in these practices, we, Saeko and I, met and talk about our common interests. So we decided to put our interest in practice, and we developed a concept of a workshop so that we could put these learnings into something that people could also benefit from. So we obtained funding from the Japanese consulate in Edinburgh to run this activity back in 2023, where we were using these concepts to raise awareness of the value of food through consciousness and reduce throwaway mentality in terms of food. We used some of these practical concepts on mindful eating, food consciousness, and also combined with culinary practices based on Japanese traditions. And the whole idea was to see whether this concept works. We did a workshop with adults, with students and staff here at Glasgow University, and it was actually very well accepted. So that gave us a lot of experience on how we could work together as a multidisciplinary team. And with that, let me just find my, okay. So we applied for funding. So we were given some money to run a similar activity, but this time we wanted to go out from the university environment and focus on school-age children. So we work in partnership with Oliver Braid from Macintosh at the Willows, the National Trust for Scotland, to find a space where we could combine also art for engagement through participatory activities, where we wanted families to experience these concepts of Mottanai and also food consciousness to promote better eating behaviors and to bring these concepts of planetary health as early as possible, so with school-age children. So we are presenting here our findings of the evaluation. of our workshop. So what we did was 2 workshops back in 2024 in 2 separate weekends. We had around 15 to 20 people. That was the amount of people we could accommodate in the space, in the workshop space at Macintosh at the Willow. And it was parents and children from the Central Belt in Glasgow. And we also gave them some activities because they came in separated weekends, but they were the same group of people. And we used pre and post questionnaires to evaluate the impact of our activities. So this is what the workshops were about. We had different activities covering food consciousness, using the 5 senses as Saeko described. We talk about food choices and production systems, and the art activity was linked to painting using willow patterns as the legacy of Charles Rennie Mackintosh. In the second workshop, we talk about eating for health and thinking about the environment, and then they had the opportunity to talk about how to eat slowly and the importance of presentation, small portion sizes, using sushi as a sushi making activity with a Japanese chef, Akemi Yokohama, who came to deliver this activity. So in the first session, children painted plates, so you can see some examples here, and then they use them for presenting the sushi and also for eating sushi. So this is what we aim with the workshop, to cultivate a positive attitude towards food, to think about the environment and environmental footprint of the food choices we make, eating for health, and also enjoyment of food is important, eating slowly, also bringing art for engagement, and thinking about culinary traditions and appreciation of food. So these are some examples of the activities. This is something that Hattie developed for thinking about production systems and food choice and reducing carbon footprint. These are some of the resources we use. So Saeko ran this activity on food consciousness using apples, so where they could chew and hear and think about food and smell using the senses. These are some of the things that they were encouraged to do at home. Think about traditional foods and what they eat at home, what they could preserve if they wanted to preserve a food in 100 years. Also thinking about the seasons and something more practical about growing on cress. So these are examples. We use the simplest way to evaluate using a scale from never to always or never to sometimes to always for different components of what we wanted as our outcome. So thinking about eating slowly, appreciating of environment. So we had several items for parents and for children. So you can see some of the examples. The plate painting activity was loved, so children were very creative. You can see here what they did. And the week after they made sushi, they put the sushi on the plates, and it was really very pretty and very successful. This is an example of the activities they did at home. So thinking about seasonal eating and growing cress. And here are some numbers for you to see. So we look at what parents and children reported before and after the questionnaires. So whether they were thinking about looking at or thinking using the senses, tasting, texture, smells. So we see that it was a change in the children. So that was significant before and after about reflecting on the senses for smells. The parents didn't change much. They were more aware of sounds. About what impact we found before and after from the questionnaires, we can see that in children, they were considering to eat healthier. They were reflecting more about food waste. You can see that the scales moved from sometimes to a bit going to always. For food production, they were more aware of food production after hearing the workshop. They were considering a bit more of planetary health as well. They were thinking about eating slowly and reflecting on traditional food. So we saw a positive trend towards these assessments. Similarly, for parents, they were more aware of eating healthy. thinking about food waste and appreciating the dimensions of food systems, using senses and eating mindfully. So some of the changes are bigger than others for the workshops. Some of the comments we had, the qualitative component, you can see some photos of the workshops here. It was very popular. Our only problem was the limited space because it was very individualized, so we couldn't accommodate more people, but it was very well received. Some of the comments here were that this session should be brought to mainstream schools to encourage people to eat more homemade food. They love hands-on activities and reflecting about the senses, and they appreciated the interactiveness of the workshop and the level of information. They really had very positive comments. So this was our evaluation. This is Oliver, and Saiko and I having a lot of fun. This was a very, very nice activity, and I'm passing now to Saiko.
Yes, thank you very much. So it was very popular, and also the pilot study at ARC went very well, and also it was very well received as well. So for the pilot study, we focused on university students and staff and adults, and for last year's project, we focused on school-aged children, young children, and their parents. But this time, we would really like to focus on more like adolescents, so P7 and also secondary school children, because that's where food shaming and like more peer pressure became much more prominent. So we together with two colleagues from education, this is a new pan-priming project funded by the SCAF, and we are going to schools in Scotland and then try to engage with school children there, P7 and S3 students, and then focusing on mindful eating or like environmental impact of foods, and that's what we have covered, but more focusing on, first of all, traditional cuisine and also the importance of traditional cuisine. And also, hopefully, we are trying to kind of encourage children, school students to appreciate diversity of different cultural traditions and foods, and also reduce peer pressure and food shaming. So this is something we would like to do early next year. So hopefully, in the future, we will be able to discuss the results of the project. Thank you very much.
I just had to get my collaborator's laptop, log in with his details, and then straight going to IT. So thank you very much for the invite. I'm really excited to share the results from our SCAF project. And I'm also excited to see there is some resemblance from Adas and Saiko in terms of the food waste and perceptions a little bit there, but it's a different perspective, but you'll see what I mean here. So I'll introduce a little bit about myself. So my name is Evie, and I'm a lecturer at the School of Pharmacy, Applied Sciences and Public Health in RGU. I teach across 4 different programs. So we have Master of Diet, and then the BSc honors for Food Nutrition and Human Health, Pharmacy, and the Public Health Nutrition course. You say contributing to several undergraduate and postgraduate modules, and I also supervise undergraduate and postgraduate research project. My main interest, you'll see, is nutrition and public health. And research focus is variable. So in the past, I've done lots about women's health and gender intervention, polycystic ovary syndrome, or the effect of gluten-free diets. But more recently, I'm interested in the nutrition education and behavioral change aspects as well, and food safety, sustainability, and waste reduction. And in terms of the professional accreditation, a registered nutritionist with the Association for Nutrition and affiliate member of the British Dietetic Association. So why this study matters. So I'm sure you're all aware that we live in a world where the look of our food matters more than its safety and nutritional value. So basically speaking, how something looks may make us more tempted to buy it and consume it rather than thinking about its nutritional value. I don't know if you're already aware that some fruits and vegetables that are being sold in UK, they are categorized according to how they look. So there are what we call marketing standards, and we have the class 1 fruits and the class 2. There is also extra class, which I'll show you later. So class 1 are the ones that they have the more perfect look. And you may notice on the front of the pack, if they're packaged, that they will have a class 1 in small letters usually. Then we have the one that we call class 2, but you may have seen in the aisle in the supermarkets that they're also called wonky, or some other supermarkets may tend to name them as perfectly imperfect. So they don't look as uniform, but they're still completely edible. So what we were wondering as a team, that whether this perfection that we see, does it come at a cost in terms of, let's say, the pesticide residue, or does it influence the microbe environment, or does it influence the antioxidant value that it may have for us? And this is the interdisciplinarity of our team, because my background is more into public health nutrition, but my collaborators come from Dr. Akash Welkamat, she comes from the microbiological perspective, and Dr. Chiari Yates from the analytical and chemical. So you'll see our 3 different lenses of science coming together for this. Just a little bit about the standards. So this is from the government website, and it's similar, that applies to the whole UK. There may be some little variation with the regional. So what the classification is, that we have the extra class, superior quality. Not all the supermarkets store these, but if they store, you may see clearly labeled as such, and they will also have a higher price. Class 1, it's usually the most popular one, and they have good quality produced there. You can see uniform color, appearance, like the perfect red, for example, if we're talking about strawberries or the red apples. Class 2, there are still very good quality, but they may have some blemishes. Maybe they're not the perfect round shape, or they have some slight bruising. However, they still are safe to be eaten, and all these standards are qualified there. So these are not applied to all the fruit and vegetables, there are specific categories. And for this project, I focused mostly on the grapes. And the reason we focused on that is because grapes are one of the most commonly consumed fruits in the UK. I thought it may be useful to show some examples from, I have apples and strawberries and then grapes. So you'll see how the extra class apple would appear as like perfect, no imperfection there. Class 1 is still very good, but you can see it's slightly, like it's not uniform round shape. And then class 1, maybe it's slightly smaller diameter, maybe not uniform color all around. And then we have the example of strawberries, another very popular fruit. So you'll see the extra class, class 1 and class 2. You may also feel sometimes when you're going to the supermarkets yourself, you may be tempted to buy, especially when it comes to fruits, the one that they're more appealing. But the issue that could happen there is that this would also lead to additional waste. And it's only until the recent years that supermarkets started selling class 2. And this is our grapes. So usually for class 1, they are a bit bigger. Like you can see, it's perfect round, and the color may be a bit more appealing compared to the class 2. So just to summarize about the class 1 and class 2, that the class 1 is the visually flawless, minor or little defects, and the class 2 is the ones that they may have some surface blemishes or irregular shapes. And the hypothesis we had there is that when something looks that good, maybe there are some practices involved there, for example, in terms of the pesticides, so that they look better, so that they keep the, let's say, fungal infections or bacterial infections away, and the insect infestation as well. And at the same time, of course, this will have potentially an effect on the microbial community on the surface, but also on the antioxidant capacity. We have, on the other hand, the public health campaign. Of course, we know that is very important for us to eat our fruit and veg. We have at least 5 portions as the advisory for fruit and vegetables. We are still not doing as well, but we're doing better than in the past. There is a lot of emphasis. On the other hand, we have the pesticide potentially issue there. So we know the fruit and vegetables, in order to be available at all times throughout the seasons, they may be relying to some pesticides. However, in UK, this is very well regulated. So the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, they do quarterly checks for the pesticide residue on fruit and vegetable. And most of them, they are within the legal limits. But there is more and more evidence suggesting that the chronic low-level exposure could be recognized as a potential risk factor for endocrine disruption. This would also lead to cancer. So our goal was to examine whether both classes of fruits, in our case grapes, were equally safe and nutritious in terms of antioxidant capacity, and whether consumers might be overlooking healthier, less perfect produce. So we aim to investigate whether the aesthetic rating of grapes relates to their safety and nutritional value. And we break this down. So in terms of safety, we mean about the pesticide residues and microbial load. And nutritional value, we only focus on the antioxidant content. So what we had is we found class 1 grapes and class 2 of the same color. And the hypothesis was that class 1 might have more pesticide residues just because they're more perfectly looking, an altered microbial load, and potential differences in the antioxidant content when you compare this to the class 2 of the same variety. So as I mentioned earlier, that we designed a multidisciplinary study involving nutrition, analysis, analytical chemistry, and microbiology. And our objectives were to detect and quantify selected pesticide residues using liquid chromatography procedure. This is an analytical technique that we use in the chemistry lab. Assess the microbial load and screen for pathogens. So we could not screen for all the pathogens. We focused on Salmonella and E. coli. These are the most common appearing in food poisoning cases in UK. And we also measured the antioxidant capacity using 2 techniques that we call DPPH and ABTS assays. So these are some very well standardized technique for measuring the antioxidant capacity. So although originally we thought we will be able to find red, green, and black grapes from both classes in the UK supermarkets, class 1 and class 2, we only found red and green, that they also had class 1 and class 2. We still have black grapes, but we could not find class 2 only. So that could be something to do with the season, because we did it like within a few months, but it's something to have in mind as well for further studies, that we would probably need to do something longer term. So each sample was processed in parallel. So we did the chemical analysis for the pesticides, microbiological testing for the general microbial load and pathogen, and the nutritional assays for antioxidants too. Little bit about the pesticide residue analysis. So we followed a standardized technique where we could extract the pesticide residues. Obviously, due to the time limitation and of course the limited funding as well, we only focused on the most commonly found pesticide residues in the UK based on the reports. So cyprodenyl, flopiram, pyrimethamine, L-sulfoxaflor. And so when we analyzed the samples, we only found fluopiram detected there in only 1 sample, but there were no patterns observed with respect to grape color or commercial classification. So we could not confidently say against a limited amount of sample, it's just we bought 1 class 1 from 1 color, 1 class 2 from the same color. But we believe that indicates that these are legally compliant and safe from a pesticide perspective. Now, in terms of the microbial load and pathogen detection, so we use some plates in order to count the total visible bacteria and selective media to screen for, as we said before, Salmonella and E. coli. Interestingly, we found no pathogenic bacteria in any of the samples, confirming that the supermarket grapes are generally microbiologically safe. However, the overall fingerprint differ between classes. So this could mean that because of the different farming practices and also the handling conditions, this has an effect on the microbial communities on grape surfaces. This is something that we would expect. Go to a little bit more analysis here. So you can see the class 1 and class 2 and the comparison between the red grapes and the green grapes. And usually what you've noticed here is the class 1s compared to class 2, they have more intact bloom, more moisture. And that's why they have slightly a higher microbial load than the green, than the class 2 as well. And class 1 often have more intact bloom, as we said before, and less abrasive handling, which could mean that the microbes could survive better due to the surface. The red grapes show a slightly higher microbial load than green grapes. And the red grapes, if you've noticed, they naturally have a softer skin, slightly higher surface sugars, which could mean there is more support for attachment of the environmental microbes there. On the other hand, green grapes typically have a firmer, thicker skin, which could limit the microbial colonization. So what we want to say from here, it could be the type of grape that we are using as well. In terms now on the mold and yeast that we found, because before it was about bacteria and this about the mold and yeast. So you can see that the class 1, they're slightly higher compared to class 2. And you see slightly again the red a bit more than the green in both categories. So although this differs, again, there were no pathogenic organisms detected in any of these. And all the difference that we found, we hypothesized have to do due to the handling and maybe the packaging as well of each type of grape. This is about the antioxidant content. So we did these two assays, we call ABTS and DBPH. And what we found is that there were no significant differences between class 1 and class 2 of the same color. So visual quality grading does not necessarily mean that there are differences in the antioxidant value as well. So class 1 could be the same as class 2 in terms of the antioxidant content. Now, if we compare, like we have the red and the green again, and you can see the comparison within each class and also between the red and the green. So the class 2 fruits showed slightly higher values than class 1 in both red and green grapes. And this could be because they experience more psychological and handling stress during packaging or during irrigation. Again, has to do what we believe due to the farming techniques or to the potential damages maybe during harvesting or the grading or the minor skin blemishes as well. And the red grapes, they showed higher values compared to the green grapes, but this is something that we know, the variety and the color. Usually the red grapes may contain higher antioxidant compounds like phenolic and anthocyanins, and the total phenolic content could be higher too in the red grapes when compared to the green. Another one of the other assay as well. The class 1 grape showed slightly higher in that assay than class 2 activity, but you can see there is no significance between two. But again, we have to be a bit careful when we're talking about significance because we only had one samples, although repeated in triplicate, but this could be variable again, depending on where we sourced it from and the variation throughout the year. So what do all these findings mean? Our results, we believe, could maybe challenge the perception that appearance also equates to quality. So despite the visible imperfection, class 2 grapes appear to be equal in nutrition in terms of antioxidant capacity and safe to eat with the class 1. So in fact, choosing them could also support sustainability by reducing food waste, discouraging overuse of pesticides, solely focusing on cosmetic standards. And it could also save some money because class 2 or the wonky vegetables are usually costed less compared to class 1. And this research bridges the science and policy because it's encouraging a shift in consumer behavior and food marketing practices. So in terms of the broader impacts, so we believe this study contributes to Scotland's Good Food Nation vision by trying to link the food aesthetics, the safety and sustainability. And now we have from the public, policymaker and researchers as well perspective. So for the public, it could reassure the consumers that they are only buying the wonky vegetables. Maybe they are not financially stable to buy the most expensive, the class 1, that they are not inferior in quality, and highlights the potential for cost savings by choosing category 2 fruits. For policymakers, provides evidence to encourage sustainable production practices and strategies to reduce food waste. And for researchers, it establishes the foundation for larger scale investigation into food safety and pesticide exposure, consumer perception as well. So a bit of the future directions here. So we would plan to expand this approach to other fruits and vegetables and also to source these throughout the year because we went to the supermarket at a specific time and we know this could have an impact on what we selected. Include a broader spectrum of pesticides as well. So we only had 4, but we can include more. And we also aim to integrate consumer behavior studies to examine a bit more about the perceptions of appearance and purchasing decisions and food waste. And ultimately, we would like to submit a bigger grant application, maybe for a UK RI project. So uniting the perspectives of public health and food chemistry, microbiology, and behavioral science together. And just want to say a big thank you to the Scots Alliance for Food because this is my first palm priming grant and that was a great experience for me to get my first project running. And also special thanks to Food Standards Scotland for advisory input. And of course, a big thank you to my team, especially Dr. Akash Wilkamadstone and Dr. Carrie Yates. That's all. Thank you very much.